Hello, Commission. Thank you for this opportunity to present as party to this rulemaking. My name is Morgan Brown, and I am currently the youth organizer and digital specialist with the Green Houe with a focus on elevating community voices. I graduated from Colorado State 2 years ago with my bachelor's in human dimensions and natural resources with a double minor in ethnic studies and political science with the intent to take a grassroots approach to environmental law and policy as I'm doing today. On top of going to school full time, I worked 2 other part-time jobs and was also a campus ambassador with Defend Our Future, which is an affiliate of the youth affiliate of the Environmental Defense Fund, where I led environmental initiatives on campus and in my community. After I graduated, I started as a fellow for the Methane Partners Campaign, which leads federal methane regulation within the oil and gas industry, and also moved up to be an organizer leading our efforts for our campus ambassadors nationwide. I simultaneously started my own LLC to further conduct my work as an environmental consultant. And after I finished my fellowship with the Methane Partners Campaign, I started as their campaign coordinator for the Colorado Methane Coalition, which is a state table to lead our campaign efforts in passing the Colorado Methane Rule, which passed in July of last year, and the Colorado Methane Protocol. With these being passed, Colorado then became the first state in the nation to adopt rules to cut methane pollution and develop a comprehensive program that utilizes direct measurement-based emission reporting to demonstrate that we are on track to meet our emission reduction goals. Through my work, I then began to see methane as an umbrella issue to the ways that industry is perpetuating harm and putting profits over the needs of people. With this methane rule, the protocol then became the way in which the rule was enforced and the way that we could provide enforcement and accountability mechanisms towards how the data will be gathered, an important piece that a lot of rules tend to fall short of. Even still, a report was released from EDF on July 31st of this year that exposed that new data from the U.S. oil and gas methane emissions are over 4 times higher than EPA estimates and 8 times greater than industry targets. As Harmony mentioned when speaking on data gaps, these gaps exist in every industry, which is why enforcement and accountability is crucial to ensuring actual protections are met. And being that we are already leading the country in our methane regulations, I also see this rulemaking as another opportunity for us to lead the country in the way we permit oil and gas. So to start, I want to recommend that there needs to be a culture change at ECMC. Right now, on average, an inspector comes to a well site once every 3 years. And so I really can't emphasize enough how this does not allow for the mitigation hierarchy to succeed, as you simply cannot avoid harm when routine inspections are being taken to ensure that aren't being taken to ensure that environmental catastrophes like spills, which have irreversible environmental consequences, are again being avoided. Many inspectors feel overextended and don't have the capacity to thoroughly do their job. So this leads me to my next point, which is that a culture change primarily needs to consist of a need to hire more staff in order to provide that accountability, that transparency, and enforcement necessary to implement these rules. I also want to name that we recognize that the Commission and the staff is tasked with the impossible in this rulemaking, yet the impossible is made possible with more help and support. So I know, speaking for myself, if I didn't have the support of Harmony, Crystal, my friends, family, and community behind me, I wouldn't have been able to find success in participating in this rulemaking process. With that, I would like to talk a little bit about the expansion of the role of the liaison and suggest that we need not only this liaison to do more, but have additional liaisons and a legal fund. So with that being said, the role of the liaison needs to go beyond DICs, as the current rules unfairly restrict the availability of community liaisons to only DICs. As you've heard from many other parties before me, overlooking other communities that also experience significant challenges in engaging in these intricate procedures. This can include not only directed not only directly impacted communities that don't qualify as that, but students, healthcare professionals, environmental groups, and anyone living in a non-attainment area that needs assistance. We would also like to emphasize that access to information, resources, and involvement in decision-making should not be contingent upon a community's DIC status. Every impacted community deserves the opportunity to engage meaningfully in this process, and the burden should not be put on us as community members or nonprofit organizations that already have limited capacity to do this job on your behalf. Speaking to my own experience as a party to this rulemaking and a group that has no lawyers or attorneys to assist us in this process, we do not have the funds to participate in this rulemaking in the same way industry does, and so we are naturally at a disadvantage. Much like us, community members are in a sinking ship and not only drowning in these rulemaking processes, but their voices are being drowned out by industry who has more money to continue to pay to pollute. If there was a legal fund for those that are struggling, then they could advocate for themselves more, and there could be more meaningful engagement in these processes. One of the events that we had over the summer was a pollution and solutions tour where we stopped at a residential oil and gas drilling site before we went to Jack's Solar Garden, an agrivoltaics farm that creates local sources of renewable energy, food production, and Colorado jobs, or what we consider to be the hope of the future. At this site, we were at the home of Kathy Kemper, which is portrayed in these pictures, and she is actually not considered to be a CIC or a DIC, despite her home being within 2,000 feet of an active oil and gas drilling site. She has given countless testimonies to the ECMC before, and even still has been told that there's no unusual activity happening, despite the fact that this site has experienced 2 spills of 3 to 5 barrels of oil, one in March of 2023 and another in April of this year. Not only was she never told that her neighborhood was going to be turned into an oil and gas fracking site before she bought her home and moved in, but no information was provided to her when there were spills as far as what the remediation process would be and how these spills would directly impact her health. In talking about the mitigation hierarchy, this is yet another example of how there's no tactics in place to avoid a situation like this, and nothing was done to even minimize or mitigate the harm for Kathy, especially because, again, she is not considered to be a DIC or a CIC. I know that this has been touched on a lot, but I would just like to expand this by quoting Senator Faith Winter's letter that she submitted to Aaron Ray and the commissioners on August 21st, as well as the 24 other representatives that signed on. She expressed that the newest draft rules reflect, and I quote, inadequate protection of disproportionately impacted communities. One recommendation that she requests is to, and I quote, remove the term cumulatively impacted community from the draft rules, as this term is counterproductive to environmental justice and serves only to weaken protections for impacted communities. As you can see on this map, which was provided to us by Earth Justice, geologically, there are no oil and gas developments happening near or in CICs. And as Faith Winter's letter states, there have been, in fact, no oil and gas permits issued in a CIC in at least the last 5 years. She goes on to say, and I quote, the CIC language included in the new draft is incompatible with the statutory defined definition of DICs and her legislative intent, which is to protect all DICs and not just a subset. This is therefore a tactic that we would like to refer to as oil and gas lighting. In other words, this language allows you to act as though you're providing protections for DICs when really these measures are falling short of providing genuine safeguards. DICs are then led to believe that they're being protected, even though, as this map illustrates, the regulations are ineffective in mitigating the real risks these community members are facing, and that you heard from public comment sessions. This then results in a dissonance between the perceived intent of the rulemaking and the actual outcomes, causing community members to doubt their own experiences and concerns regarding the ongoing threats to their health and environment, especially if they don't qualify as a DIC or CIC. Since the industry is going to be presenting last and is then going to have the opportunity to provide rebuttals towards our presentations, I would also like to stress that they too will be practicing oil and gaslighting by downplaying, denying, or misleading you about the environmental and health impacts of their operations, especially when they are allowed to give data that is often not verified and there are no consequences for that variance. This will involve providing false or misleading information, discrediting our legitimate concerns, and or shifting blame to make affected community members question the validity of their experiences. So we hosted a cumulative impact public comment workshop a couple weeks back, and through that we were able to gather what were some common themes among our community members in this process. So overall, mistrust is huge and is really the overarching theme in this process, with one person in particular asking the question of why should anyone trust this rulemaking or these systems when time and time again they feel let down and the commission has not given any reason for community members to trust these systems. And so I would like to ask the question of how are you going to address the mistrust so that public and affected communities can meaningfully engage in these processes and feel like their voices matter? And so this mistrust stems from the fact that time and time again, profits are prioritized over the safety and lives of people. And the most recent draft being a clear example of the power industry has in these spaces to get exactly what they want, how they want it, while community members are forced to make more and more sacrifices. People are tired of making comments and not feeling heard when their health, lives, and safety is at risk. And so everyone deserves the right to live and not just survive. Many of our community members do not have access to healthy air, water, and land due to them being on the front lines, with many of them struggling with asthma because of this fact, as well as countless other health concerns that Harmony mentioned. Breathing clean air then becomes a luxury, not a right, in a state known for its natural beauty. Also, as Harmony mentioned, we're experiencing ozone alerts every day, the highest worldwide temperatures, and many community members feel like they can't leave their homes. Going back to my community liaison slide, our community members lack the resources and knowledge to know what's going on and be informed with the best ways they can engage. Our community members want hard facts, not estimates, and need governmental systems that are determined to avoid the harm rather than scramble to mitigate it, and need enforcement rather than more empty promises. Rules without teeth are useless, and our community members need a dedicated commission to ensure that these regulations are more than just a paperwork exercise. That being said, we do provide our community members with the knowledge and data of what's going on, but many of them are surprised to discover how bad the air quality really is, again, are gaslit to think otherwise. Ultimately, people are afraid of what's going to happen if we continue down this path that we're currently on. And our community members, being that they're on the front lines, are at the highest risk of developing these health issues. So again, we really need ECMC to hire the staff to address these issues. So it's not up to residents who already have enough on their plates, such as full-time jobs, raising families, and juggling with the struggles of raising basic costs. One of our key partners is Cultivando, which is a nonprofit organization led by Latina and Indigenous women who live in Commerce City communities that they serve in. They follow the Promotora model of community engagement, educating and empowering other community members to promote health equity, collaboration, and social change. A large part of their work was conducting a multifaceted air quality monitoring around the Suncor refinery after they were told that their lived experience does not count as data, even though it is qualitative. Once they did start gathering this quantitative data, they were harassed by industry and intimidated to stop. They made an amazing documentary about this process, but regardless, I just wanted to share the social and environmental justice themes they found to illustrate our intersectional findings. I would like to finish by covering concerns and challenges that we have had with this rulemaking process as a whole. And so to start, the introduction of a new draft rule in June without adequate consultation not only undermines the work that community organizations such as ours put into our pre-hearing statements, but also undermine this rulemaking process as a whole, as it was clearly persuaded by industry and the governor's motives. As prior to our pre-hearing statement being submitted, the commission had communicated they had communicated in a Zoom on enhanced systems and practices that they are working towards, and I quote, a solution-oriented rulemaking that you can collectively request to have a holistic approach that creates a regulatory arena that allows operations, staff, stakeholders, and the commission to look at holistically at OGGP. This in turn not only undermines our position as party to this rulemaking, as it was a clear indication of the direction this rulemaking is headed, but also undermines the work and intent of legislators that crafted this rule. And again, to quote Faith Winters, the ECMC had over a year to develop rules that fulfill its statutory mandate under HB 23-1294 and was granted an extension under HB 24-1346 to provide the agency additional time to respond to stakeholder concerns. And yet it has come to our attention that the current draft deviates significantly from the intent of these laws we work to pass, jeopardizing the protection of disproportionately impacted communities and allowing operators broad leeway to exceed pollution thresholds and ignore state directives to reduce greenhouse gas and nitrogen oxide pollution. We are then informed that this draft rule was in fact a supplementary suggestion to the first draft rules, yet this was never properly communicated and created more confusion in an already confusing process. Either way, in a proper rulemaking, a new draft rule would allow for a new pre-hearing statement, yet in our rebuttal, we were forced to not only respond to new rules, but other people's pre-hearing statements and with less pages. Ineffective communication seems to be a clear theme, as not only was the intentions of these rules not properly communicated, but we were never provided the one-pagers, toolkits, summaries that we were promised to not only set ourselves up for success, but set our communities up for success that would be engaging in public and written comments. This then increased my own workflow, as I was forced to do more work I'm not getting paid for on top of submitting the pre-hearing statements, rebuttals, and presentations, which is only one of my workflows as an environmental consultant. The non-existent resources that we were given to engage community members is a clear indication that public comments are performative at best. And so how do you expect us to engage others on a process that we ourselves are struggling to engage in, simply because these rulemakings are set up to disempower the very people that are the most affected, and the ECMC claims this rulemaking is intended to serve? Being that we are participating in this rulemaking not as environmental lawyers and attorneys, but as community members, and do not possess the funds to seek out assistance, this process is inherently more difficult for us to navigate. That being said, our largest suggestion was to give red lines to help in drafting this rule, yet given our position, we do not possess the ability to do that. It then becomes clear that the people that do have the money, like industry, are able to provide better red lines and are more likely to have their suggestions included, with the second draft being a clear example, which is dismissive of the financial barriers that we are unable to overcome and the lack of care to our voices in this rulemaking. I do believe that most of these concerns and challenges could have been overcome with more staff, as this rulemaking process has made me question not only the integrity of the ECMC, but the overburdened staff that seems to lack the support they need to truly be successful, so that we in turn can be successful. And I would like to pass it back to Harmony to close this out.
Perfect. In summary, we need a new approach to permitting, and I think we all know that. Additional staff is needed for better implementation. Improved data is needed for permitting and cumulative impact reports, and there needs to be a cumulative assessment over time. Oil and gas that is permitted by the ECMC and produced in the state then travels on rail, pipes, and trucks to compressor stations, terminals. Some of this oil and gas is then processed at Suncor, which is just 1 mile from our community space. Then back on a pipe, truck, or train, and then burned at a utility plant, asphalt factory, a military base, or at DIA. All of this progress, production, and profits have real consequences on the cumulative and compounding impacts being felt by Colorado communities today. I understand that much of what I just said is outside the jurisdiction of the ECMC and this rulemaking. Today, we plant the seeds for fully looking at and protecting people from the cumulative impacts of oil and gas, because currently no one really is. And again, communities are experiencing the full impacts. The ECMC is the starting point with permitting, and we ask you to do as much as you can to be protective. I want to also highlight that even with Colorado's regulations, we still deliver some of the cheapest barrels of oil at WTI. And a lot of this is due to our cheaper produced water costs. And I also ask one more question here. What happens when a community becomes a DIC because of oil and gas operations? We would love to continue connections, conversations, collaborations to come together with a variety of stakeholders to truly form data, information, reports, information that we can put out to the public, and giving the opportunity for a public to meaningfully dialogue with you all so that we can all create a better world for the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation from the Green Houe Connection. A lot of information there. At this time, the panel is open for questions. All right, I'm not seeing questions, which means you did a really good job of getting through a lot of information in a short amount of time. So with that, we will look forward to your continued